Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Navigating an Ancient Faith podcast. Coming to you, as always, are, we always say David and JR, but I thought about, what about just saying the brothers Gortney, or the Gortney brothers, like the Walensky brothers. They didn't do the Matrix. There's some movie producers that are always known as, so-and-so brothers.
Who was it?
I think it was the Walensky brothers. There's a couple of them, too. But
yeah, I'm thinking of Kingpin and something about Mary. I forget those guys.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. But yeah, maybe we just ought to say, brought to you by the Gortney brothers. Maybe it doesn't have the same ring, but we'll try.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. We'll see.
Anyway,
you just got back from Montana, right?
I did. I was in Montana for a week. And
how was it?
It was really interesting. First of all, it's beautiful. I got to play in a really odd way a long story, which is probably not. We don't have time for this podcast, but I got to play movie star a little bit because my wife was involved in the filming of a movie last summer in Montana, and so we got invited to the premiere, and through our involvement, we actually got to walk the red carpet. And it's this little
cool.
Montana town,
Yeah.
But there were a couple of well-known actors in the film, and they kind of lined us up, and they're like, "Okay, you guys are going to go with this group." Yeah, so we got to walk the red carpet and wave to the cameras and sit in and watch
pause for pictures and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What'd that feel like?
I
Was
felt
it
a bit
surreal
surreal, a bit like an imposter. It's like, man, what am I doing here?
Sure, yeah.
And the truth is, everyone looks at us and they're like, who are you guys? But anyway, it was fun.
Just in case, we'll go ahead and take a picture.
Right. It was fun to play movie star for a couple hours.
That's cool, man. Yeah, there you go.
So that was fun. Yeah.
All right. So what is on the topic for today?
So we are going to continue recording a couple of shorts while we take a break in July, and then we'll pick back up in August. But in the last episode, you threw out this idea of ancient attention, and if I remember correctly, we really talked about the trade-off between information and concentration. So we batted that idea
That's
around.
Right.
And so today we're going to pick up a similar thought, but the idea of ancient wisdom. And again, by these shorts or just these one-offs, this is an entire series. We're just using our downtime here to bat around a couple of ideas.
That's right.
Shorts probably isn't appropriate because I think we went about 25 minutes last time, but no time limits. We'll just see how this conversation goes.
I was about to say, I'm waiting for the day when you and I just talk for 5 minutes and say, well, that's it. That's all I got. Okay, we'll see you.
We said it was
I
going to be short.
don't know if that's ever going to happen or not.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, so anyway, we're going to talk about an idea I wrestled with for, I guess, last year. And by the way, we put corresponding articles on the website, navigatinganancientfaith.com. We're not just going to rehash the articles. So I'd encourage you, if either of these last two podcasts spark some interest, go to the website and check out the articles associated with those as well. And there you can leave comments. But I was wrestling with this idea a couple of years ago. I wanted to learn more about Greek philosophy. And so, by the way, I just finished reading the complete works of Plato.
Wow.
That's no small feat. I think I've been working at it for about a year and a half now.
I was about to say, that's a pretty good undertaking.
So, yeah. So, probably if you just read the complete works of Plato, you probably have at least a minor in Greek philosophy. No,
I'm proud of you for that, because that is not easy. I've read some Plato. Some stuff is really interesting and grabs you, but it doesn't have the grab that modern writing has,
Right.
It's just kind of a back and forth,
Overall, it's fascinating. Some of his works are really interesting, especially after you've read a couple and you kind of get that flow of how he writes and what he's talking about. But I'll be honest, there are a couple where I'm just skimming it because I just don't even know what they're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
But most of them are not like that. But anyway, so I set out on this kind of a learning path of Greek philosophy. I wanted to understand it a bit more. Well, one of the things that really grabbed my attention was Stoicism. It's a school of Greek philosophy. And I came to find out last year, and I think actually you turned me on to this website. I don't know if you remember that.
It was something like Optimize or something like that. I also know that I listen to Modern Wisdom, which it's a podcast, and he talks about Stoic philosophy a lot and things like that.
Right. So come to find out, there are a number of people who call themselves modern Stoics, and I've read a couple of their books.
It's making a bit of a comeback.
Yeah. It's making a strong comeback. But I kind of found myself drawn to this idea of maybe even selfishly liking the idea of calling myself a modern Stoic. It's kind of a cool thing kind of a hip thing to call yourself, But Anyway, I was reading these books, and one thing that jumped out at me is I liked how it was laid out. I liked how it was structured, and there were these principles about this is how you go through life. This is how you respond to adversity. These are the things that create virtue. And by the way, just as an overview, the goal of Stoicism is to achieve this state called eudaimonia in ancient Greek, but it's really this idea of human flourishing. And the way that you do that is you pursue the virtues, which is a Greek concept as well. We don't really talk about virtues today, but people still understand what it means to be a virtuous person. So,
that moral virtue is the highest good, and that it leads to the ultimate in flourishing, things like that.
Right, flourishing. So to become a truly flourishing, fulfilled person, you actually have to be a virtuous person, and that's kind of a cool idea,
Sure.
So the way they laid it out fascinated me, and I found myself thinking, man, I really like this idea of Stoicism. But then I had this other thought. And then I'll pause and get your input into this idea, because then I found myself with this tension of, well, Christianity, the Bible, has a lot of these same things, but it's in a different form. So, why would I pursue Stoicism when I can simply pursue my faith at a deeper level? And I wrestled with that idea for a couple of months. So this idea of ancient wisdom kind of comes out of that wrestling, and I'll eventually get to one of my conclusions. But yeah, that's the thing I was wrestling with. I'll get your thoughts. Have you wrestled with that? Or you've read some Stoicism too, like what's the good and the bad, the draw of it versus Christianity, say. Not that I'm pitting the two against each other, by the way.
Well, no, I think it's a good question. I mean, maybe I'll ask you the question, what are the gaps in, let's just call it contemporary religion, that you see that Stoicism filled for you? What was the draw? Because you're right. It is something. It is a framework of living a virtuous life. And if I were to stop somebody on the street, they would say, "Oh yeah, that sounds like religion. That sounds like you're going to church or something like that." So, what was it that what gaps did that fill?
Well, so I think one of the gaps for me, and this may be a personal thing, but it's something you and I have talked about too, is that I think modern religion actually does not do a very good job of laying out a path of virtue. I know even in the Protestant church, I've been involved in Protestant churches throughout my life, and I've been behind the scenes, and they'll just tell you that they struggle with how to put people on the path of discipleship and what it even looks like.
Right.
And so I see that gap in what you might say modern religion. And then I read Stoicism, and I thought to myself, well, Stoicism has a lot of it already mapped out for you. And of course, not the ultimate end goal, because as a Christian, you would say, the end goal isn't human flourishing. It's actually to be conformed to the image of Christ. At least that's what I would say the end goal of the Christian life is. But all of these other, you might say lower virtues, very good things, it's an entire system laid out that actually leads people on this path. And of course, all these modern adherents, are very disciplined people. That says they've changed their life, they become better people. They become more disciplined people. And that part of it, I guess, really appealed to me. That is a gap I see in modern religion. I don't know. You agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. But what I hear you saying is that Stoicism is a more structured framework, whereas the biblical narrative is, well, that's it. The Bible is more of a narrative.
It's the narrative, right? Yeah.
Right. It's the narrative side of the structural framework. And obviously there's overlap. The Bible does have a framework on how to live your life also. But you're right. The Stoics did kind of take that to the next level and very meticulously kind of laid out this path.
Right. And, there's even this idea that I think there were some Stoic philosophers, I think it's Epictetus, might have been alive and writing around the same time as the Apostle Paul. And so there are some people who would see a lot of Stoicism in the Apostle Paul. Some people don't like that comparison, but I definitely think Paul was familiar with some aspects of Stoic philosophy. And there are some people who would say, look, Stoicism has a lot of compatibility with Christianity, and there would be the other side of the coin is there's other people who would say, well, no, it's got nothing to do with each other, completely different aims in life. So all that's kind of this fascinating give and take between some of the ideas of Stoicism and how they relate to Christianity. But yeah, I think the conclusion I came to was that Christianity is a story. At its very heart, it's a story, right? And that's what differs from Stoicism. Stoicism isn't a story. It's a framework, it's a structure on how to live, and you could argue whether it's a good one or not so good, but a lot of people have benefited from it. But at its heart, Christianity is a story. And I think one of the conclusions I came to was really that forces the church, or that forces us to actually pull that framework out of the story. But it's all there in the story.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Yeah. Do you think that Stoicism is an attempt at morality free from religion? Do you think that's part of the negative view of it, if there is one?
Well, I would say it depends on whether you're talking about ancient Stoicism or modern Stoicism. And
either one. I mean, Stoicism, we just said, is making a resurgence, and maybe we could dig into why we think that's happening. But yeah, the ancient Stoicism, either way. Do you think that it's an attempt at morality free from religion?
I think when philosophy was just blossoming, around 4th century BC, 3rd century BC, I do think one of the appeals of philosophy was that it was starting to break away from all the traditional gods. And, religion back in Greek times looked very different than religion to our day. Like the goal of religion back in ancient Greece was not to become a better person. It was basically not to irritate the gods. Right. So, and so then philosophy comes along and fills that gap, right? And says, no, there's actually value in becoming a better person. And really, you're not going to get it by worshiping Zeus. So
that's right.
There's a little bit of that. And so I think in terms of modern day philosophy and Stoicism, I think, again, it depends on what circles you run in. I think some people would definitely say, no, there's a lot of good principles we can pull in to faith and learn from Stoicism and then two working together. And there would be others, I've read some others, who are really adamant to say, like, no, the idea of Stoicism is the potential lies within yourself. It doesn't lie with a God somewhere. And I've heard modern Stoics talk about that too. So it just depends on what circles of Stoicism, I guess, you run in.
Right. Well, ancient Stoics, and I suppose modern Stoics too, they criticize superstition.
Yeah.
They don't like the excessive emphasis on external rituals and certainly things like sacrifices, but ceremony. They view those practices as kind of mere superstition, and it doesn't contribute to someone's moral development or their inner virtue. And so Stoics kind of believe that true piety and devotion should be focused on cultivating wisdom and virtue and ultimately living in harmony with nature is what they'd say. But yeah, they're anti kind of superstition. And you're right, ancient religion, certainly ancient Greek religion, very, very superstitious, very, very pointed at the gods, pointed at those things that you just talked about. And so I think Stoicism was kind of an attempt to pull the virtue that religion at the time was trying to instill in us, but maybe come up with a more structured academic type framework for virtue, as opposed to simply pointing at quote unquote the gods and saying this is why we should be living virtuous lives.
Right. And the other, the gods in ancient Greece, in ancient Greek mythology too, the gods are hardly paradigms of virtue either.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
That was the kind of the first hurdle to overcome, because it's like, hey, be like Zeus, and it's like, really? You want to be like Zeus?
Yeah, that's
he's
a
kind
tough
of
one.
a ladies' man scoundrel running around on his wife all the time. But anyway, that's beside the point. Well, we were talking the other day, and I thought you brought up an interesting point of one of the benefits of story over just a structure of philosophy is that it's easy to remember. I don't know if you remember talking about that, but
yeah, sure.
But go ahead and share what you were saying about that.
Well, the idea that a story is so easily transferred that I might not remember the concepts and all the 5 points or whatever of a certain idea, but a story is just easy to remember, and you carry it with you. And even if you don't get the exact details right, you get the gist of the story right, and it's just so easily transferable, especially in an ancient society when you didn't have the written word.
Right, right.
And yeah, so stories are just easy to transfer.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the strengths of the Bible, the Christian story, is that, well, there's a lot of it, but it actually all flows together to tell one story, and it's easy to take with you, which is easier to take with you than, the story of there was the Son of God who came to earth and lived this perfect life and then died on the cross and rose from the grave, right? That story is easy to take with you more so than 10 propositions of how to achieve better virtue in your life or something.
Yeah, right? That's right. And you can dig through it different layers. A story is better for different ages.
Right.
So a child can understand a story, and how many times we were talking about some of these fairy tales that we've recently heard podcasts of digging into. And, these are stories that I knew from being a kid. And when you hear somebody peel back the layers of it, you're like, oh, wow, I think they're right. I think that's exactly what that story means.
Yeah.
There is something deeper behind it. Sure. So you can kind of tackle it at different levels of intellect, different levels of wisdom. And obviously the best stories can be dug into very deeply, right? And so I would say the biblical story is certainly one of the deepest stories that can be remembered as a child or dug into as a brilliant philosopher.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can take any story in the New Testament or letters of Paul, and there's literally been books written on the layers of meaning. And that's the other thing I think that was helpful for me to think through is this idea that story is transferable, right? I mean, some of the stories we tell, you mentioned the fairy tales. I mean, those were told ages ago, and some reason we're still telling them, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
No one goes, well, that's out of date. No, I mean, a good fairy tale captures the imagination, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And there's something...
Well, I just saw the other day, I was looking at a breakdown of Pinocchio, and I was thinking, I'm going to find out who wrote Pinocchio and get the original book and kind of, dig down deep into that story. They don't even know who the original author is. It's been written a dozen times. Obviously you got the Disney version, but there is no author, at least that I know of, that is definitive as the author of Pinocchio. It's just been a story that's been passed down from generation, for centuries, I suppose.
Yeah, we still tell it today, and Disney makes remakes of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes ruin it, right? But anyway.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. If you ask anybody, Disney's the author of Pinocchio, but no, it goes way before Walt.
Yeah. Well, so I guess that's some of the conclusions that I came to. Is look, story is memorable, story is transferable, story is easily communicated, and at the same time, if you're willing to, I guess, pull out the structure, like the principles and the structure is all there too in a story. You just have to work to pull it out.
Right, that's right.
And
so maybe that's the question: why do you think Stoicism is making a resurgence when the narrative is already there? Do you think that churches are having trouble pulling out the structure?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think churches in general have a difficult time making the story really, how do I say this, applicable to modern day life, and I would say almost systematizing it in a way that you could say, okay, here's what Jesus said, but what does that mean tomorrow when I go into work and my boss irritates me, or what does that mean? And I think I don't think it's too much to say a lot of modern Christianity maybe fell into a little bit of pop psychology, so some of it feels very shallow. I would say.
Yeah.
Now, not all of it. There are some good churches out there really teaching some good things, so don't misunderstanding. But I think as a general characterization, I think if you ask the person off the street, as a general characterization, they would say, well, yeah, it seems pretty shallow,
Yeah, the modern church is focused more on having an interesting sermon that grabs the attention. And we've talked about this before, about kind of the idea. You go to church and you're not getting the structure. You're getting 3 points that will make your marriage better, or, ideas to help raise your kids and things like that. Not that those don't matter, but that it's sort of turned into a pop psychology self-help idea group that we come to and we listen. It's almost like we go to a TED Talk about how to raise kids, or how to get along with coworkers, or a lot of times that's what it kind of boils down to when you go to church. And there's a place for that, but you're right, you're not pulling out a deeper structure, and so it's no surprise that when Stoicism, the resurgence of Stoicism comes along, that people wake up and they're like, oh wow, that makes sense. These stories that I've known my whole life, that's this structure behind it, and it grabs people's attention because they haven't heard it.
Right.
So we're kind of malnourished to it.
And I think there's a deeper thread there too, that, look, if you teach me how to be a better person, then I will automatically be probably a better husband, a better father, a better employee at work. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's a deeper level, and that's where I think the Greek idea of virtue, I think, could make a resurgence too, and maybe that's the resurgence behind Stoicism is, look, if the church actually said, here's what it means to be a better person, and here's how it's formed in you, then maybe we wouldn't need so many sermons on here's how to be a better husband and a better wife and a better parent and a better kid. Those are, there's workshops for that, times for that, but really, at the heart of it, it's how to be a better person. And in Christian language, I would say how to be transformed to the image of Christ, not just to be a better father or husband or worker or boss.
Yeah, it's getting down to that foundational nature of ourselves that we need to address.
Right.
And when we do that, all those other things seem to lay out pretty nicely. And again, it's not that there's not a place to tackle these everyday topics that we come in contact with, but that, when I go to church and when I consider the supernatural and when I consider eternity, I want something a little bit deeper than 5 points on how to be a good neighbor or, that type of thing. Yeah, that's right. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, so that's kind of my journey. Like I said, I put an article on the website. I'll end with this, that I just finished reading Everlasting Man by G.K. Chesterton, and you've already read
book.
it.
Yeah,
but interestingly enough, he basically ended on this same idea that the difference between philosophy and religion, is the way he put it, is that religion is the story. Religion is the story that captures the framework, that captures everything philosophy is trying to do, but it's not just a framework. And I thought that was kind of a cool idea, to read someone like Chesterton and go, oh, okay, he arrived at the same place I did 100 years ago, but nevertheless, maybe I'm on the right
I like
track.
that. Sure, yeah, that's right. Well, if you're in the category of Chesterton, then you're in good company. So. Right. That's right.
Right, but he talks about that was a fascinating book, because he talks about mythology and philosophy and religion, and that's kind of how he put a bow on it as well. So I think we'll leave it there. Let Chesterton have the last word.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think to summarize it, I think you're saying that philosophy, it captures the human condition that we can all understand, but religion is better at explaining the why behind all of that.
Right.
And so there's a lot in philosophy that really resonates with people, because there's, you hear things and you're like, oh, wow, that really makes sense to me, what's going on behind the scenes. But that doesn't ultimately get down to that foundation of why is it that way? Why is it that we feel like that we should be better people? Why don't we just move along being selfish and doing what's best for me? What is it behind all that? And that's what I think religion is attempting to address.
Right, and a religion tells it tells the overarching narrative. it's the story, but it tells the overarching narrative about why things are the way they are.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we just need to tap into that rich story.
So one of the things about Stoicism, I was trying to kind of wrap this up because I don't want to pit philosophy against religion.
Right.
But one of the things I was thinking about is Stoicism kind of has its place, and it reminds me of, I think you wrote something about sort of the different categories of truth, and that there's a hierarchy to it, that you have your personal truth, whatever you're feeling. You have scientific truth that obviously explains things that can be measured and, tested scientifically. And then you have philosophical truth that explains the human condition. And then above all that, you have religious truth that is sort of what we were talking about earlier, the why behind the human condition. And so Stoicism it has its category, but a lot of times you were saying that people sort of that they get the hierarchy of it wrong, that they put the philosophical truth above the religious truth, right?
Yeah, a lot of that idea, we'll explore this on another podcast.
Yeah,
but a lot of
I
that
like the
idea
idea.
is, there's a lot of competing truth ideas out there. And when you take a step back, they're not really competing. They're just not aligned properly on the hierarchy. Obviously, as people of faith, we believe that spiritual truth is at the top of the hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a good way to kind of wrap this up is, so, there's a lot of good points about something like Stoicism, but they don't have to compete because, at least as a person of faith, I'm not putting Stoicism at the top of the hierarchy.
Right. But they do have to be in their proper place.
They have to be in their proper place. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we see that today in our culture where, my personal truth is the highest truth. And you're like, no, you've got that completely upside down, right?
Right. And not that there's not a personal truth. Not that there's not a place for that, right? I mean, because everybody has different experiences and they see the world differently. So there is a place for it, but you have to have it in the right position in the hierarchy.
Yeah,
no, that's a good way of putting it. It doesn't necessarily compete with all the other truths.
Right.
It just has its place. All right, there you go. So, you're gonna keep going down the Stoicism path.
I'll always kind of be interested in it because I do think there are good things to learn from it. But I landed at the idea of like, no, let's figure out this whole healing, meaning, and transformation. Let's do that rather than just become a Stoic, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, lots of philosophies package ideas really, really well, and so it resonates. And so if you can find something in Stoicism that really explains the human condition in a particular way, and I think that's what you saw, then there's value in that. And ultimately, we can bring that into religion and kind of see where it ties into that religious hierarchy. Where does this work well with my understanding of religion? And if it does, then build it in. I like it.
Yeah.
Stick with it. Sure.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Keep with Plato. So who you going to read after Plato?
Well,
the complete works of who?
Yeah. The problem with reading the complete works of anyone is like, well, I've read them now, so.
Yeah, well,
no,
go to Chesterton. Best of luck with Chesterton.
I actually started a little book on an introduction to Aristotle, but he's all over the place. I mean, a brilliant thinker, but man, he wrote all kinds of things about scientific treatises. It was much beyond philosophy, so I think I won't be reading the complete works of Aristotle if there is such a thing. But
well, it's funny. It's interesting that a lot of the ancient scientists, philosophers, you read their complete works, or you learn more about them, and you realize they were kind of nuts in this one little arena of life. I mean, it's tough to hit your horse to any ancient philosopher completely, But take what you can from them. I like it.
Yeah, but they were brilliant in their time. They have a lot of wisdom for us today, and way ahead of their time.
Sure,
to be sure. So. Well, I think it's a good place to stop for this quote short. Hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, if you like what you heard, there are articles on our website, navigatingancientfaith.com. You have an opportunity to leave comments there on those articles, or if you just want to be in on a discussion about anything we talked about, you can join our Facebook group, Navigating an Ancient Faith, as well.
Yep.
And we'll pick things back up if you're listening in real time in August. We're going to start a series on symbolism in the Psalms, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, yeah.
Yeah, that should be a good one. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for listening, everyone.
All right, we'll see y'all.